Thursday, March 28th, 2019. I'd like to welcome everyone for being here today and thank you. This is the regular board meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District, and I'd like to acknowledge that we are within the territory of the Sechelt First Nation, and we are calling to order, and first item on our agenda is to adopt the agenda. So moved, Director Seegers, seconded Director McMahon. Are there any additions or any items to add into the agenda today? Anything? Seeing none, we will, all those in favor? Yes. None opposed. Moving on, the minutes, we'll start with Annex A with our Acting Chief Administrative Officer. There's a correction to the board meeting minutes of March 14th, 2019. So, just hang on. I'm going to ask the ACAO if she wants to comment on the on Annex A, and then we will move receipt of the minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. It's a bit of a housekeeping issue in that there was a transcription error when the minutes were prepared, and unfortunately it wasn't noticed until after the committee recommendation was adopted, and so we are just suggesting that the board make a motion to correct that error.
Okay, thank you. So may I have a motion to correct the board meeting minutes of March 14th, 2019? Okay, and so the motion is to move the correction as well as receipt of the regular board meeting minutes of March 14th. So collecting both of those in the same motion. So moved and seconded. All those, any further comment or question before I call the question on that? All those in favor? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes or unfinished business? Looking to our team. Did we not? Oh, no. I guess I'll have to do that as a separate. So move receipt, or may I ask for a motion to move receipt of the regular board meeting minutes of March 14th? So moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. Do we need to have a separate for adoption as well? Adopt as amended. Okay, and so moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes and unfinished business? Seeing none, nothing from nobody jumping up there. The next item on our agenda is we have a delegation. We have Jerry Patterson from West Sechelt regarding SCRD bylaw number 422 and water use for food production. So Jerry, please come forward and welcome.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank all of the directors and staff for assisting me in being here today to speak to you regarding the need of water for residential gardens, specifically food production, and also for farms. I'm going to keep my presentation very brief. I've provided 3 documents into the agenda for your consideration. The first one on page 14 of your agenda is the Health Canada's updated food guide. The significance of this document is that Health Canada is recommending that 50% of any meal should be fruits and vegetables. So we are trying to achieve this. Many residential people in the community are trying to achieve this, and many of us that have small farms like myself are trying to produce food products to support the community and provide a local food source. On page 19 of the agenda is the SCRD bylaw number 422. What we have found in discussing bylaw number 422 with SCRD staff in the past is that in many ways it is extremely restrictive to food production, and it is extremely restrictive to farms. There is no provision within bylaw number 422 for consistent watering of food products, in particular vegetables and fruits, and no provision for farms to be able to continue their business of watering their plants and their products. What I have done is I've included for your reference on page 45 of your agenda the Regional District of Nanaimo bylaw. One of the great things of this bylaw, which I provided as an example, is that if you look at the agenda page 55, item 5, exemptions, and then proceed on to page 56 of the agenda. And if you look at item F, it specifically states a person may water vegetable gardens or fruit trees at any day and time. This is what we need. Further on, if you go again on page 56, if you look at item I, you'll find that farms are exempt from water restrictions. Again, this is something that we require. So I am simply here to speak to the fact that residential individuals with their home gardens need to be able to water their food products as required in order to produce the food they require. In addition, farms need water in order to sit there and produce our products, which support the local economy and support the locals living in our community with healthy local food sources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Patterson. I'm going to go to the board. Do you have any questions or comments for our delegation? Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. A question about farms and how you see a farm. Is it in BC assessment as a farm status, someone who is growing food and selling it and making a profit? So I'm to differentiate a home gardener versus more of a commercial enterprise, and how you would see those being different or the same.
To answer your question is that under BC assessment there is a farm classification, so certainly that is one item to consider, and certainly I think that farms that have achieved farm classification should be supported with water that they need for their products. The other matter is the use of agriculture land in the Agriculture Land Reserve, and that is used for farming and production. Whether they have achieved the BC assessment farm classification or not, they are still using Agriculture Land Reserve land and should be supported. So the definition of farms is something that the regional district could certainly define further. If you look at the bylaw that the regional district in Nanaimo uses, that they do go on to clarify tree farms, nurseries. So there is room within the overall word of farm to sit there and to further define it.
Director Seekers.
Thank you. Thanks for presenting, Jerry. I know at our last infrastructure meeting, when staff came forward with the stages for water restrictions, we requested they go and look at some of the other municipalities with regards to water for vegetables and food. And also we asked the Agricultural Advisory Committee to also weigh in on this. So at their last meeting, this was something that came forward to them. So we're looking at gathering that information because we hear you and we hear the community. Food production is important, and we need to look at how we can support that on the Sunshine Coast.
Thanks. And it's important that everybody's considering it and engaging, and that is why I'm here today, to give a very brief story. Many people here know that I grew up in this community, and as much as I've come and gone a few times, I ran into an 88-year-old fellow the other day at the grocery store who's I've known since I was about 4 or 5 years old. Phenomenal gardener, phenomenal. And I asked him, I said, so, what are you planning to garden this year? And he said, after 3 years of having to watch my garden die and go without fresh food, I'm not planting a garden this year.
Director McMahon.
Yep. I attended the Agricultural Advisory Committee meeting on Tuesday, and obviously they are really concerned, and they will be coming. They made some recommendations on the drought management plan, but they'll also be coming back to us with more thoughts about how we can manage water better for agriculture, and also working with the newly formed Farmers Institute, which is awesome. So this is very much on our radar.
And that is good to hear. The problem that myself and other people that garden or farm are facing is this is our planting season. So we need to know how much water we're going to have or not now. Last year I lost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of plant stock because I was once again denied the ability to access water. And so this year I'm being extremely cautious. I'm diversifying my plant stock and am very, very concerned what exactly I'm going to do, as are others, is that we're not in a position to keep on spending money on plant stock and seeds and all the other processes that go with it and labor in order to sit there and subsequently watch our stock die.
Okay, directors, any further questions or comments for Mr. Hilt?
Sure. Some of the things that came up at the Agriculture Advisory was how can the regional district support food producers not using community water systems, such as helping them understand how to store water, how to harvest rainwater, how to build systems. So that's one little piece. And the other is what you're seeing on the ground today in terms of moisture content in the soils and what your forecast is for your future planting season.
In response to your question is that one of the problems that those of us that produce food and grow food are facing is that in Canada, the requirement to water a food product is that the water must meet drinking water standards, the Canadian drinking water standards. So to date, what we've experienced, what we've found is that the only water that meets that requirement testing-wise is the SCRD water. So when it comes to food products, we're limited, very, very limited. And those of us that are providing or selling food products to other individuals obviously want to be very careful to make sure that we're using the highest quality of water we possibly can. We don't want to have the E. coli warnings that you see on the news and you see in the stores. Sorry, you can't buy romaine because guess what? You might get sick or die from it. So we're trying to avoid that, and we're taking every step we can. And for most of us, is that if we can't have safe water to grow our food products, we're not going to grow the food products. So that's one answer. The second part, as far as alternate water, is in my case, on my small farm, is I've diversified my crops so that I am now growing some crops, Christmas trees, seedlings. And they do not require potable or drinking water standard water, so I use my reservoir water ponds for watering them as required in order to conserve. But that still doesn't help me when you hit stage 3 and stage 4. My food products are hooped. So, from that perspective, as far as some of the other water storage mechanisms, I have concern about them. If they're used for landscaping products, on your lawn, hedges, whatever, perhaps that's fine and safe. Personally, there's some of the water that I've seen the water test results from. I wouldn't permit the water on my property. I think it's a health and safety risk.
Okay. Directors, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. I think probably the requirement that food producers must meet the water they use must meet drinking water standards I understand completely why there's that high standard, which is hard to test with rain falling from the sky, which is, interesting. But thank you so much for that. And it is, as the other directors have said, it is something we're definitely cognizant and watching and looking for solutions in order for food production to be happening on the Sunshine Coast. So thank you so much.
And thank you to all of you for your time. Thanks.
Okay, so we are going to move on. Item number 5 under reports. I'm going to we'll separate these into the 2 blocks. So first is we have Annex D, which is the Planning and Community Development Committee recommendations. Move receipt of reports first. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, so let's go into Annex D first. The Planning and Community Development Committee recommendations of March 14th, 2019. We had 2 recommendations that were previously adopted. Directors, before we move this block as a whole, are there any of those recommendations that you would like to pull out to debate separately? Director Hiltz.
Page 68, recommendation number 22 with regards to the Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Okay, so on page 68, recommendation number 22, we will pull that one out. Are there any other ones that anyone would like to pull out? Okay, seeing none, so we'll move the block with the exception of 22 first. So may I have a move to adopt the recommendations? So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, Director Hiltz, if you'd like to speak to, on page 68, recommendation number 22, please.
Okay, so this is going back to February 26th Agricultural Committee, and there was a wish for the committee to include a representative from the Sunshine Coast Farmers Institute. And staff might have some ideas on how to do this in terms of the committee has space for 10 people. There's 8 sitting. The terms of reference would suggest that you could add a person. So how to bring the representative to the committee, and they're interested in how to move this forward. Do we appoint this? So staff has something to say about it. I think they can help out.
Okay, I'll go over to staff and see what you have for comment on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Agricultural Advisory Committee terms of reference do allow for 10 members to be appointed, and staff can confirm that there are currently 9 members appointed with 1 vacant position. So should the board wish to make an additional appointment, that would be a possibility under the current terms of reference. The terms of reference as drafted right now are just for individuals with experience, interest, or expertise in agriculture. They don't include a reference to particular organizations. But should the board wish to make an appointment under the current terms of reference, staff could follow up with the Farmers Institute to encourage an application for participation in the Agricultural Advisory Committee that could be brought to a future committee for an appointment to be made. That would be an expeditious option available to the board. Thank you.
And GM Hall, would you like a motion to that effect, or just simply the conversation be enough?
Thank you, Chair. A motion is always helpful, and staff can act on it appropriately then. Thank you.
Okay, Director Hiltz, I'll look to you.
Yes, so I guess it would be proposed a motion for staff, ideally to the board, to appoint a representative and for staff to ask for an application from that person. I believe that's how, his wording was excellent.
Yes, Jim Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Staff would suggest the next step would be to seek an application for membership, so that perhaps that a membership or that an invitation for participation be extended, and then it would come back to a committee for a decision. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to look to Sherry because I think she's wordsmithed something on the fly.
And that staff contact the Farmers Institute to seek an application for a representative from the Farmers Institute to be appointed as a member of the Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Does that work for you? Okay. And Director Hill? Director Hills?
That's lovely language. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and seconded. Any discussion to the motion on the floor? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of that motion? Okay, thank you. And then we do need to go back to recommendation 22 and adopt that the Planning and Community Development Committee I should actually ask Director Hiltz if there was anything else in recommendation 22 that you wanted to discuss before we receive that recommendation.
There was the piece about the farm status and exempt from stage 4 watering restrictions, but I believe as that stands, staff will deal with it directly, I think is how it's going to go.
I'll look over to staff for an answer on that.
Thank you, Chair. That a report will be brought forward to the upcoming Infrastructure Services Committee, which will include that.
Lovely, thank you. So that you're good then? Okay, so then recommendation number 22 was the Planning and Community Development Committee recommended that the Agricultural Advisory Committee minutes of February 26, 2019 be received. So moved and seconded. Okay, all those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, so that's all of our Planning and Community Development Committee recommendations. We are now moving down to the Infrastructure Service Committee recommendations, number 1 through 5 of March 21st, 2019, which is Annex E of your package. And directors, would anybody like to pull any of those recommendations out before we move the, yes, Director Beamish.
Recommendation number 5, please, on page 71.
Okay, so we'll pull out recommendation number 5 on page 71. And any of the other recommendations that any directors would like to pull out to discuss separately? Okay, seeing none, so we'll move adoption of the Infrastructure Service Committee recommendations numbers 1 through 4 of March 21st, 2019. So moved, seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. And over to Director Beamish for number 5 on page 71.
This is a recommendation that the Town of Gibsonsby requests to initiate discussion around a water governance model for the Sunshine Coast. I guess my question around that is how will that be communicated? Is the regional district going to send a letter to the town? I have discussed it with the administrator, but will the staff initiate that discussion or with the town? And it should include also the district of Sechelt. So
Okay.
How would you like that initiated?
I will look over to staff, please.
That would be our normal process to
Okay.
send a letter indicating the board's direction.
Okay, good. Yeah. Thank you. That's all. Just one clarification.
Okay. And did you,
I'd move the recommendation.
you would move the recommendation and second it? Any further discussion on that recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. Okay. We don't have any communications or motions, but we do have bylaws. We have a lot of bylaws today. And so we are going to start with on Annex F, number 7 in your agenda package, the Sunshine Coast Regional District Building Amendment Bylaw. number 687.2, 2019. We're going to be looking for all three readings and adoption today, and this is a weighted vote, and the weighting is just listed there on your front page of your agenda package. And so, just hang on, I need to get to the, okay. I'm not on the right page yet. One moment. 2, 3, 4. There we go. So may I have a motion for first reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Building Amendment Bylaw number 687.2, 2019? May I have a move for first reading? So moved. And seconded? Seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. So for a second time, Sunshine Coast Regional District Building Amendment Bylaw number 687.2, 2019. May I have a mover for second reading, please? So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Sunshine Coast Regional District Building Amendment Bylaw number 687.2, 2019. May it be read for a third time? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. And may we have, like to move adoption of the Sunshine Coast Regional District Building Amendment Bylaw number 687.2, 2019. So moved adoption. So moved and seconded. Seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. All right. So the next thing on our agenda is the Sunshine Coast Regional District Financial Plan Bylaw number 721, 2019. And of course, this is a weighted vote as well. And this is the bylaw to adopt the 5-year financial plan for the years 2019 to 2023. It's on Annex G. Before we go into the bylaw, I'm going to look over to our CFO and see if there's any further comment that she'd like to make on this. Seeing none, you've talked about it enough. Okay, so this is, so may I have a mover for first reading, please? So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, Sunshine Coast Regional District Financial Bylaw number 721, 2019. May I have a mover for to be read a second time? So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. May I have the Sunshine Coast Regional District Financial Plan Bylaw number 721, 2019. May I have a mover for third reading, please, to be read a third time and seconded. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Carries. And move adoption of the Sunshine Coast Regional District Financial Plan Bylaw number 721, 2019. So moved and seconded. Any comments or on this? Director McMahon?
Big thank you to staff. Lots of numbers. We trust you. I didn't read every single one of them. Oops, am I supposed to say that? Sorry.
That's a direct quote from Director McMahon. Okay. And thank you to staff as well. It's been. Thank you for your patience with a brand new board. So it's been very appreciated. So we have the motion on the floor. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. That's our first budget. Wow! Yay! Woo! So sorry. Holy cow! All right, it is exciting. It's it's the first of the term. So fantastic. All right. Moving on, number 9 on your agenda package, which is Annex H in the package, is the Roberts Creek Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 641.11, and we're going to move forward first reading today. Who would like to make a move? And seconded? Seconded? All those in favor? Motion carries. Opposed? Sorry, are you opposed? Would you like that registered? Yep. Okay. All right. So that moves that one through to, that's first reading of that bylaw. The next on our agenda is Annex I, Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Bylaw Amendment number 310.182 2019, first reading, and it starts on page 119 of your package. Who would like to move this? This is for electoral area directors. Looking to my rural directors, who would like to move this forward? My rural directors, so moved. And seconded? Seconded. Okay. And I'll call the question. All those in favor of first reading? Opposed? And would you like that registered? Okay. Director McMahon, registered opposition. Okay. Moving down to Annex J, number 11 in your package, Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 310.180, 2018. This is for second reading of this bylaw. And the electoral area directors, one vote each. Who'd like to move this forward? Motion to move forward with the first, or the second reading, sorry. So moved and seconded? Seconded. All those in favor? Okay. None opposed this time? Motion carries. Annex K, the Roberts Creek Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 641.12, which is pages 125, 126 in your package. And this is to move this is for the electoral area directors. We'll move first reading. Who'd like to move first reading? So moved and seconded. Seconded. Okay. All those in favor? Okay. None opposed. Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Amendment, we're number 13 in the package, or Annex L. Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Amendment number 310.185, 2019. We're going to move forward first reading. The electoral area directors, one vote each. May I move first reading, please? Motion for first reading. So moved and seconded. Seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. None opposed. Number 14 in your package, or Annex M, is the Egmont Pender Harbor Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 432.33, 2017. This is for electoral area directors, and the motion, I'm going to look over to Ms. Legault, and do we need two motions? Number one, to rescind the third reading, and then number two, third reading as amended, and then adoption. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first motion that I'm going to ask for is to rescind the third reading as previously so moved. And seconded? Seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. And may I have a motion for third reading of the Egmont Pender Harbor Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 432.33, 2017. So moved, third reading, and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. And may I have the just a moment, I need a breath. The Egmont Pender Harbor Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 432.33, 2017. May I have a motion for adoption, please? So moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay. And then Annex N, and the last bylaw on our list today is Sunshine Coast Regional District Electoral Area A Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 337.114, 2017. And this is to adopt this bylaw amendment, and the electoral area directors, one vote each. May I have a motion to adopt? So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Carries. Thank you. Okay. We got through the fun stuff. Now we'll go down to the director's reports, and Director Tighe suggested alphabetical order, and I thought that's a great idea, but we'll do it in reverse alphabetical order. By last name, which starts with ties. So, Director Tighe, you're first up.
All right. Well, I actually have nothing to report for this small period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tighe. Next up, we have Director Seegers.
Thank you. All right. What's happened in my world in Sechelt? We had our inaugural meeting of our Advisory Planning Commission, so I attended that. We have some new members on there. Great cross-section. They're not all from Sechelt. That's not a requirement of our terms of reference, so we have some outside, but really looking forward to that commission being able to provide some real guidance to our council. We have architects, we have geotechs, we have all kinds of people on there, so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to mention the Squamish session that majority of us attended. It was really nice to have a meeting with our Squamish neighbors, and one of the things they mentioned in the session was that they are looking to reach out to the other governments that they interact with, and they indicated that we were next in doing a agreement with them. So we'll be hearing from them in the next while. You probably noticed that we've got a lot of FaceTime notice about our rainbow crosswalk in Sechelt. Mm-hmm. What you may also have seen is that the council got out right before a council meeting on Wednesday, and we actually did an Abbey Road picture on the. We had a little fun. Anyway, so that's posted. You'll see more of that during Pride Month coming up. Mayor Beamish, Chair Pratt, and I attended the session with Capilano University. They actually came out and did their Board of Governors meeting here on the Sunshine Coast. They're launching a 10-year strategic plan. So what they're going to be doing over the next 10 years. They pointed out to me offside that of their senior team, there's one who's been there the longest, and that's 3 years. All the rest of them are new, and they're really looking at revitalizing what Capilano University is doing here and throughout their organization. They said they've really embraced the notion of a regional university, and it's changed their focus. So I think you'll notice in the paper already they've advertised some of the courses that they're offering here. They're looking at alternative delivery models, and they're wanting to come out to the community and engage with us as to what we want to see happen here on the Sunshine Coast with Capilano University. So when they come forward with that, we'll make sure we get a cross-section of both industry and government up and down the coast so that we can tell them what it is that we want to see. And they're very interested in doing that. I had a conversation offline with the chair, who is stepping down now after 6 years on the board. And he indicated that we should really think outside the box. They've got a little bit of money, so let's see what we can do with that campus. So we'll do that. What else? Attended the Coast Community Builders Association AGM, and I wanted to just mention one thing from that. They mentioned that the BC Building Code has now come out with a step process, right? Like we're stepping towards greater sustainability. They said one of the issues that we may have with that is we need to ensure that our building inspectors actually have the background to be able to check on these various things. Because if they don't have the background, they're not going to actually be able to assess what they see on the ground. So we need to make sure that internally we're providing the training for our staff so that they can actually deal with these when they come up against them. I think I'll leave it to Councillor Lamb or Director Lamb to talk about what we've covered off in Sechelt otherwise. Thank you.
Yeah, but you have to wait your turn. So I'm next on the list if we're going to go alphabetically by last name backwards. So so everybody can figure out when they're coming up now. I will. So I attended the Squamish Nation event, and along with the other board members, and it was an incredibly valuable session, and really looking forward to building those relationships. And then also on March 20th, with some of the directors as well as a couple of councillors from Seashalt and Gibsons, we sat down and had a conversation regarding the Sunshine Coast forest industry, and had a bit of a primer on that, and it was a valuable day, and I have notes from that meeting that I'll be circulating amongst the group as we discuss other things that we may want to move forward. Coast Community Builders Association AGM was a great event. Of course, Seashalt Library Board meeting on the 23rd. Quite an energetic group, and lots going on there as they're looking on their strategic planning moving forward. And then the last couple of days, I've been in Victoria since Monday, and I came back on the very last night, so I'm a little bit tired, but had a regional district chair and CAO session, so got to meet with other regional district chairs from across the province, as well as some of their CAOs. And it was a jammed-packed session over issues, everything from communications to building code to fire safety. There were a couple of ministers around. We talked about solid waste and recycling. I have about 20 pages of notes of things, even active transportation. So essentially rural issues that we're all dealing with, and it was a really great conversation, and to hear the different threads that are happening across the province and ways that other regional districts are looking at meeting the needs of their constituents, as well as dealing with senior levels of government and what's been working for them and what kind of advocacy they do, and it's given me some ideas, so I'm really looking forward at talking more with our team about that. And then yesterday I was in the legislature when our MLA, Nicholas Simons, presented the petition from about the Sunshine Coast needs a highway. So there were a couple of buttons around. If you want one, I'm sure you can have one of mine because I've got a stack and I know where to get more. But it was great to be there to see the petition delivered and be there with members of the Sunshine Coast 101 team and speak with them about their efforts. And then also have a member of the opposition actually speak in favor, and a member from the north, John Rustad, who's a liberal MLA, very familiar with our area, and he also spoke in favor after the petition was delivered. He made a comment as a private member on its time for the Sunshine Coast to have that. So I made sure we all made sure we sent him messages after that to thank him for that as well. So it's nice to have that support from across from the legislature as well. And then as soon as we're done today, a number of us are headed down to Harrison Hot Springs for another conference that Director Seegers and I will actually be presenting at, which is really cool. We're going to be presenting on the Sunshine Coast Women's Campaign School that we hosted last spring in an effort to encourage more women to run on the Sunshine Coast and support women, and that's what got us we like to think it's what pushed us over the 50% barrier, so for elected women on the Sunshine Coast, so that's pretty exciting. So next on the list I have is Director McMahon.
Thank you. I have a fairly lengthy report today. I'm going to take Area D's time. I also went to the Squamish Forum. I'd like to thank Mayor Beamish for inviting the fringe areas to the Town of Gibson's strategic planning session. So I attended their strategic planning for 2 days, which was interesting. I think we had a good discussion. because I was there hanging out, I hitched a ride with Mayor Beamish and crashed the event at Capilano University, which was very interesting. And then I later went back because they had a reception on Saturday afternoon for former staff and students, of which I am both. So I had a nice time there and met one of my old bosses. On March 20th, I attended the forestry industry meeting at Airspan. I also attended the Coast Car Co-op, AGM. On March 22nd, following up on the presentation by Diane Sanford last week, I attended the meeting of the Salish Sea Nearshore Habitat Recovery Project Technical Working Group at Rockwood Centre. That was quite interesting. They've been working very closely with the Sechelt Nation, and the nation has been supportive, but they did make it clear that they would have liked to have been consulted before the federal grant was applied for, and not after. So that's just an FYI that we should keep an eye on that sort of thing. They got into a lot of discussion, of course, of site restoration, various tenures, and removal of sunken derelict boats, and which raises a whole lot of issues. And I was asked what the SCRD can do to help. So there I was, deer in the spotlight. I said that I suspected that we are not well resourced to help in terms of not having a function and staff and boats. But I said I would follow up on that. As a next step, they're very anxious to meet with us and talk about marine issues, because Diane told me that there is a lot of provincial and federal money available right now for habitat restoration, and we may have some opportunities to collaborate. So we'll be moving forward with that for sure. On Monday, I had an unexpected tour of stormwater damage when I tried to go out on my usual trail up Soames Hill behind the Grantham's Hall and found a huge washout, which has been barricaded off by staff. But this is exactly what happens when stormwater is not well managed. The ravine is falling in, is the short thing. And last night I attended my APC meeting where we discussed the Whispering Firs Park name change, and the suggestion was made that we should instead rename the subdivision Whispering Firs Subdivision, because they thought that was a good name. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the High Ground Conference this weekend. Finally, last week was an unusually busy week, in part because of the Gibson's strategic planning. But I did keep track of my time, including answering emails and meeting with constituents, and it was 29 hours, which at the rate of rural director stipend works out to 92 cents an hour. Personally, I think I'm closer to being worth my weight in gold, so I checked that online too, and the current, give or take an ounce, I'm worth $3,376,281.60. Thank you.
You are more than worth your weight in gold, Donna. Yeah. Priceless, yes. Thank you. Next on the list is Director Lee. Please.
I would go okay with my weight in gold for the wages. Not worth it, though. I had fairly busy last couple of weeks, but I'll just talk about some of the more, what I think are the interesting meetings I have attended. I attended something called FARA, Pender Harbor and Area Residents Association meetings on March the 19th. They're now up to 500 members. They're quite a large organization. Very interesting, very active, but I really enjoyed the discussion on derelict boats, that they're chasing the derelict boat problem in Pender, and it's quite a challenge. And they, fortunately or unfortunately, got started early and have to raise some money themselves for some of the boats that they are getting rid of. whereas now I believe that you can probably find enough government funding to look after it yourself. But anyways, they're working on that. They're working through that. I went to try to go to the AVIC Special Committee on Solid Waste on March 25th, and it was quite interesting. Some new things. They're going to try and separate the governance from the administration. So in effect, that means they're going to try and get some of the CAOs to do the work, and then we just bless them after. I like that idea. They're going to gather up all the solid waste plans and look for commonalities amongst them, which I thought was good. And they made a point that whenever you have a ban on dumping something, you'd better have an alternative for people to use, or else you're going to have illegal dumping again. So I thought that was good. Another point made by the people at our shipping is that the U.S. exchange rate and the basic costs of it are now making shipping not sustainable. So everybody seems to have the problem now. They talked about shared services, and I suggested a shared landfill somewhere in Vancouver Island, but it wasn't well received. And then they talked about zero waste, and something interesting. They talked about the definition of zero waste, and there's something called International Alliance of Zero Waste that does have a definition. But the conversation was quite strongly around the fact that you can't have zero waste until you have a way of disposing of it. And the consensus is that landfills or some way of getting rid of solid waste is going to be around for quite a while yet, even though everybody is striving towards zero waste, and everybody agrees that's where you need to be. But to be realistic, you have to have somehow a getting there. And they talked about sorting or mixed items. And on Vancouver Island, we've avoided it here by having a common dumping system, solid waste disposal. But on Vancouver Island, if you have different regulations from one to the other, people will hop across the boundary and pick the cheapest one. So they're quite strong on trying to get a common pricing, a common way of getting rid of recycling, handling the recycling. So they're working on that. And I heard a new term, and that was circular economy. And that means that the person that does the packaging does the collecting and then figures out how to reuse the packaging or recycle. So it seemed like a good concept. So that was the solid waste. And yesterday I met with Colin, who's the area manager here from Modi, to talk about issues in Pender and to get to know him a little bit better. It was actually a very nice meeting. I found out that there's winter classes from A, B, C, and D of snow removal and slippery roads, and basically the main highway and the school bus routes get treated first, and then after that is the everybody else if they have time. So I thought they did a pretty good job actually in our area. In spite of the fact having a couple trucks broke down, they hired a private contractor, so I did put that message out there. And then we talked about the typical potholes and yellow line painting and repaving, and let's just say we talked about it. The interesting fact I took away from that is that a typical $25 a ton for asphalt in Vancouver works out to $50 a ton for asphalt laid here. So their strategy is to build everything up and then do it all at once so they get a lower cost. So it was quite a difference. I appreciated the challenge. And those are just rough rule of thumb figures, but it's a lot more expensive to do the work here. And then we talked about my favorite, and that is parking on the side of the roads. And in my area, we have 4 government docks, and we have a lot of summer properties on islands where people will park in prime spots for a month, leave their car, and that they use up all the spots for the people that want to try and use their boats and go out and come back in. Trying to figure out how to solve that one. We talked about the fact that people are just leaving their cars, taking the plates off and going away. We have 3 or 4 of those in the same prime spots. How do we handle that? And it's even worse. We have boats abandoned on right-of-ways. And Colin relayed a story to me about how expensive it is just to get rid of one of those boats that's been abandoned, and the fiberglass crunching can get pretty expensive. And I paid very close attention because now that I've been looking at it, I realize it's not just a rural. The municipalities have that problem where they are Modi roads through the middle. And how do you enforce the parking? There's no way. I could take an unlicensed car and drop it there and go, and now you got one forever. So it's a common problem. One of the suggestions is that we could take it on ourselves and budget a certain amount and use a bylaw to handle it. That's, I guess, one solution that could happen. I don't know exactly what the discussions are, so I look forward to having that discussion at the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities. And so that's me. I talk more than usual, but thank you.
We like it when you talk, Director Lee. Yeah, the whole, it was interesting to listen to some of the chairs of the regional districts. I'm thinking specifically of Strathcona and Comox Valley, and because they were one very large regional district that got split into 2. So they actually share landfills, and that are now, they figured out the closure costs for their landfills. That's the big issue that they're dealing with right now, because now it's been mandated that they need to monitor them for 25 years after. And this is something that we've discovered with the costs of monitoring after the closure. And for the 5 landfills that they're going to be looking at, it's a liability of over $16 million, plus the 25 years of monitoring costs. So the number is astronomical. So there's a huge reason to divert waste, and because then you can expand the life expectancy of your landfill. So it's an interesting conversation to be a part of. So thank you. Moving over to Director Lamb, please.
Okay, so with the District of Sechelt, we had lunch with the Sechelt elders, and it was kind of fun being there because I'd gone to school with them or worked with them or played soccer, or been able to participate with everyone that was in the room somehow. And then we had the day with the Squamish Nation, and it was good because we traveled with members from the Sechelt band, so we had breakfast together and just had a chance to chat and just kind of be open. Just, you know, it was good, and it was interesting to try and get a dialogue going that's long overdue. So it seems like with the group we went down with and the people we met with, it seems like everybody's on the same board to get together and get talking, see how we can work together. And then at the District of Sechelt, I guess we're, the big thing is getting closer to hopefully getting our budget in line. I don't think we're quite finished yet, but we're getting closer. That's me for, thank you.
Thank you, Director Lamb. Going down to Area F, and Director Hiltz, please.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I'll go chronologically. March 15th, the Squamish Territory Leadership Forum was very interesting. And one of the stories that came out of the group that I was at was one of the counselors, who's a 4-term counselor, said that she got involved in the nation governance when she was younger, and it was at a general meeting. And she describes general meetings in the Squamish as a large group of people asking any question in the world of their council. And she said it's kind of a bit more of a free-for-all kind of is how, and her and her friend got all fired up at this, and next thing you know, they were both counselors. So it's a little bit different situation. They bring bus loads of people into the general meeting. It's an all-day affair. There's food, and it's a huge event for them. So it's a little bit different strategy than what we have here. March 20th, the forestry format. Thank you, Chair, for arranging that. And it was really nice to get out onto a cut block and see what it looked like, understand cubic meters and what stumpage is and what waste is, and the economics and the various workers that participated in the harvesting and the moving and the scaling. It was very interesting to see that detail and the hands-on. And tomorrow is my first Ocean Watch task force meeting, so I'm not going to higher ground, so that'll be interesting to see that, first time going to that. And then into the future is next week is the Water Stewardship Symposium in Parksville, which is a timely issue for members of the Sunshine Coast and Vancouver Island, and the membership now is 200 people are participating in that, and I believe about 3 weeks ago it was just under 100, so it's growing in popularity, and there's obviously a need for understanding water stewardship and governance, particularly in the Salish Sea area. And I'll leave it there.
Terrific. And there was a reporter from CBC on Coast earlier this week and interviewed Director Seegers and I on water. And mine was by phone because I was in transit down to Victoria. But it's on the CBC web now, and Twitter and LinkedIn, actually, too. That's where I got the notification this morning. So, so just a bit on the interview and a little bit of the piece on the water on the Sunshine Coast. So that was, it's there. So moving on to Town of Gibsons, and Director Beamish, please.
Thank you. A number of the things that have been previously reported, I was attended as well, so I won't belay those points. We are still doing our strategic plan. We spent a day and a half working with that, and I appreciate the input from Director McMahon on that. Very good conversations, and conversations that was timely that we had, because now we've been working together for 5 months, and everybody understands a little bit more about governance and the rules. So there was, I think, a more directed and thorough conversation that people were having there. It was very appreciated. And the CAPU session I also attended. The Coast Community Builders AGM, first one I've attended there. The focus was on passive housing standards, and that was very interesting as to what the opportunities are on the coast for that. I was also interviewed by the CBC, and that was on affordable housing, so that Councillor Larry Ladwig and I joined for that interview, and it was very interesting. Be interested to see how it comes out. It was also interesting that at the very end they came back and said, "Oh, one more question. How does it feel like to run for council to become mayor?" What's that got to do with affordable housing? So it was interesting. We entertained the visitors from the Broken Down Ferry the other day in Gibsons. It was very interesting because wandering around town, nobody was going anywhere. Everybody was sitting in the restaurants and sitting in the restaurants and still sitting in the restaurants, waiting for a ferry to go, sort of thing, or rebooking their accommodations. I don't know what, but there was there was no traffic. It was actually it felt like a day off, and Forrest Bueller's Day Off, sort of thing, Ferris Bueller. So it was kind of interesting for that. And we should use more down days like that on the coast. We are continuing our budget discussions, and I think we have one more session in 2 weeks, and I think we'll have our budget completed. Just for council's and board's information, we had a complaint from one member of the public in Gibson's about the deer population. I forwarded that to councilors, and I said, maybe we should think about different options of dealing with deer. And I got kind of poo-pooed on it, and one of the councilors said, we don't have a deer problem, sort of thing. And on the way home that evening from wherever he had been, he encountered 2 deer crossing the street to join 24 other deer on the other side of the street. He says the first time he's seen that mega pod of deer in the community. And when I was leaving the council meeting the other night, it was interesting because there's if you know the fencing around the George construction site in Lower Gibson's there's about 4 deer up against the fencing on the roadside. And people, it's kind of like a petting zoo. People were standing there looking at them. So the deer had no fear, the people had no fear, and it was just a kind of very friendly thing. So maybe we should just corral them all. But I have put my name forward to offer my name as a member of a UBCM committee looking at deer management. And I've done it from the concept of a perspective of a community that's just starting to engage in this issue, as opposed to one that's kind of has all sorts of options already developed, is looking. It's something that's new come up to us, and we have seen some fairly large herds around. So, and finally, I'm getting in shape to ride my bike to work with with Mayor Seegers, so that in the month of May, during Active Transportation Month, so that I've committed to riding my bike to the office for every meeting at the town office, and I've challenged. No, I won't be riding here. That's your challenge. That's your challenge to the rest of the rural directors. But I did challenge Mayor Seegers to find an alternate way of transportation to her office as well. So thank you very much.
We'll do that. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to pictures. I haven't been challenged yet, but now I have a long way to go, and there's not a lot of safe highway to go along. So I will say that Gibson's deer are the most civically minded deer I've ever seen, because they're probably the only deer in the world I've seen that use the crosswalks to go over to City Hall or the library, which was quite interesting. And to quote Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. So it's I was watching from over on the island going, I don't know if I'm going to get home. So, yeah, it's one thing I did hear, though, is that BC Ferry Corporation really stepped up really quickly to provide additional services with the water taxi, and I do know, that's a long time to spend on a ferry, especially when you see ground right there in front of you. But safety is the most ultimate concern. So even though it was a emergent situation, they did the best they could, and I think they need to be commended for that. So so that's our director's reports. New business, Director McMahon.
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. One is that before Christmas, we raised the question, which constituents keep asking us, of whether the SCRD can refuse new water service on the grounds that we don't have enough water. And I was hoping that we would get a staff report back on that, just to give us some perspective on what the ramifications are and what, the practice has been for perhaps other jurisdictions in BC to deal with this. This is something that comes up all the time, in person, on Facebook, letters to the editor. So I think we need to address this.
I'm going to look over to staff for comment.
Thank you. It is actually a fairly complicated issue, and we do have a directive to follow up on that matter. It was a file that the former CAO was working on primarily, and so we have some catch-up to do in that area.
Director McMahon?
And I just had one more actually for the board, really, was do we know what our next steps are with our strategic plan? And at what point will we be discussing this? Because we do need to move it forward.
Okay, so I will put this over to the acting CAO, but I will let the board know that I met briefly with our consultant just to get an update while I was away over the weekend, and I know there's probably a bit of a timeline that's needing to be adjusted, but I'll go over to staff for that.
Thank you. So I also had the opportunity to have a brief meeting with our consultant on the strategic plan and look at next steps from the senior leadership team. We were requested to assist with populating some tactics for the strategies that the board had identified, and we used the opportunity of a leadership forum with staff this past Tuesday to brainstorm some tactics and have a meeting at the end of the day today with the senior leadership team to look at that and some timelines to attach to that, so we can return that information by the end of the week to our consultant to bring a new draft forward, and then he's interested in meeting with the board again, because with the timing of the CAO's departure, to give us a little bit more continuity in the process, so he would come back and go through it with the board again.
Sounds great.
Okay, perfect. Any other new business? Okay, so we do have an in-camera meeting, but we also have a Sunshine Coast Regional Hospital District meeting, and we have delegations and presentations scheduled for that. So I think probably the best thing to do is we'll make our motion to go in camera, but we will adjourn, or should we adjourn? I'm going to look over to the CO, or to the acting CAO, and ask for the best procedure forward, please.
I think under parliamentary procedure, it's a fix a time to which to adjourn. So technically speaking, we're taking a recess, and we'll reconvene after the Regional Hospital District meeting.
Okay. Okay, we have that motion, and seconded. Okay, all those in favor? Motion carries. I still need to move the in-camera right now, or not until after?
It can be done either way. Either we come back in an open meeting and then close the meeting, or we give the resolution now. Given that the public is all here now.
Do the resolution now, and for the close now, and then we'll just reconvene after the regional hospital. Okay? Okay, so moved that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91 A, C, G, I, and K of the Community Charter, personal information about identifiable individual, labor relations, or other public relations, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and negotiations related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service has been moved and seconded. You seconded. All those in favor? Okay, so we're recessing our board meeting and to go into the hospital district meeting, but before that I will ask for any questions either from media or the public.